Executive Director and Board Chairman, also President of Advanced Home Energy. Welcome, Ori, and we look forward to your presentation today.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for taking the time this morning to meet with us. Before I start off, let me thank the many people who are involved in putting together our vision today and the presentation itself. In particular, thank you to Efficiency First California board members Matt Golden, Devin Hartman for a lot of input into the vision that we have in this presentation, staff member Chris Cohn, who we just heard from, who gave a lot of input and helped put this together, and really the many other Efficiency First California members whose contributions helped build this vision and whose inspiration were part of putting this together. So thanks to everyone. I want to convey to you in the next about 45 minutes our vision of a market-based solution that links home performance to reliable and real energy savings. And before I really dive in, I want to clarify for a moment. When I say home performance, that we want to link home performance to reliable and real energy savings, I'm not referring to any particular business model or any level of energy upgrade. When I say performance, I'm referring to how efficiently a house uses energy, not how that efficiency was delivered, per se. Kind of the foundation of home performance is all about looking at how to reduce the actual energy use of a home. And that concept, a small group of pioneers championed that message, and I really think the roots of Energy Upgrade California started from that idea. But as it turns out, I don't think that's where Energy Upgrade California finds itself today. And before we step into our vision, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here by talking about where Energy Upgrade California kind of stands today and the gloomy numbers. We've received some bad press. But I think the conversation where we're going warrants a quick look at Energy Upgrade California's performance so far. So let me just start off by talking about that for a moment here. Go ahead, Chris. You can see from the graph here, it's Energy Upgrade California's new job submissions by month, that simply the market is not growing. We're just not hitting it. And there's some pretty gloomy stuff in here. If you look at the money spent on this program, we spent $200 million in program overhead. And that's not including the incentives that actually went to our clients. And with all that overhead spent in 2013 and 2014, we've only produced 3,615 jobs and just about 7,500 in total for the entire EUC program to date. And if you do the numbers, that doesn't look so hot. It's about over $25,000 per project on program costs. That's 2 times the actual job cost, which is stunning to me. That's not at all what any of us would have hoped having started this off. And there's some pretty significant stumbling blocks, I think, that led to this low uptick in numbers. We know it's a pretty cumbersome program, and it's awfully confusing to contractors. As a contractor, I've been in this from the very beginning, and I can say it's tough. It's really tough for us. The rules keep changing. The incentives keep changing. The testing protocols keep changing. It's just not easy to be part of Energy Upgrade California, quite honestly. And in fact, for many contractors, it costs them more to participate in EUC than the sales value that they receive from the incentive. So we've actually seen established EUC contractors leaving the program, which is disastrous in many ways. What does it say if folks that have actually been in it and been trying to do it are walking away from the program entirely? And then to just kind of top it off, the way that the program is designed and the energy modeling itself sets these crazy customer expectations. If I was to actually tell my customers, hey, you're going to get 30% energy savings on your bills, I know that that's not true. I know that's wildly inaccurate. So we go through all this work and all this program design that I have to do to come up with a number that actually I'm not even sharing with my customers. It's useless information. So all these things really limit the variety of business models that can work in Energy Upgrade California. And we see the current market is just not working because companies, they're not able to be profitable. And the main reason for us not scaling is that unless energy efficiency is a good business to be in for contractors, no amount of program adjustments or tweaking is going to get us on track. I know we all want to make some adjustment and hope that we just find the perfect recipe, that suddenly all the contractors are going to love it and clients are going to jump on board. It's just not going to happen. So we have a pretty gloomy picture of EUC as it stands today. But this webinar is all about the good news. And the good news is that the fundamentals of this market, what we should care most about, the fundamentals are actually working. So let's take a look at that for a moment. Next slide. When we look at the actual savings realized by Energy Upgrade California, we see that home performance really does work. Hooray, that's great. You know, what we thought is supposed to happen does happen. Let's look at these numbers. In PG&E's territory, Energy Upgrade California had a 21% actual gas savings. And that was with an average incentive of only 17.2%, which is not a big incentive. Just by way of comparison, the California Solar Initiative, when it first launched, provided around a 50% average. I think its first few years of its inception, if I'm not mistaken. And that really gave that industry a shot in the arm. Whereas in our industry, we don't have that high of incentive. And if we stripped away all the program costs, the layers of regulations, the requirements of one software package, et cetera, you know, this $200 million that we've spent on all this overhead, there's clearly a great potential for EUC to provide significant energy savings if we can just get it to scale. And I think, from what I've heard, that's exactly what we want from a public policy perspective. Our public policy goals are all about actual energy savings, right? We want fewer power plants and less emissions, and that is all about less consumption. It's not about models or points. So we need to develop a system that delivers results that are lucrative for customers and contractors and aligns everyone's interests towards achieving those real energy savings. So it's time for a real big shift. Next slide, Chris. It's time to be brave and make a big change to this program, because we need Energy Upgrade California to create an energy efficiency market based on rewarding its results, not micromanaging the process, as I mentioned, or constraining business model. If we have a scalable private sector energy efficiency market, it's a lot of words. Basically, if we let the market forces work here and allow the energy efficiency market scale, we do that, we reward good results, like I said, actual energy savings and energy and innovation. And all EUC needs to do is connect the dots to make energy efficiency a valued commodity, sought after by property owners and delivered by building performance professionals. Okay, let me say, I'll dive into this a little more, but we make energy efficiency a valued commodity. And then the market will select winning business models based on companies' abilities to produce actual energy savings, their ability to make good profits, and their ability to provide solutions that homeowners want to buy, cost-effective solutions. Now, we don't know what this exactly looks like because it's not possible to develop these models in advance. I mean, we tried with EUC and we see what happens. It's only through the selection and iteration process that happens in the marketplace that these best approaches emerge. Really what we need to do, rather than having Energy Upgrade California be a program and a model, we need to get the program out of the way to allow for innovation to happen. And we have seen this work really well in other industries. This isn't that much of a maverick concept here. And as we all know, perhaps the most similar example and successful example is the solar industry. So let's take a look at the solar story for a moment. Next slide, Chris. We have a great example of how this worked in the California Solar Initiative. So kudos to whoever designed that program, made it work. Awesome. CSI did a great job of taking a boutique industry and incentivizing the right thing, namely energy production, right? That's what it was all about. It didn't even try to define how solar companies would provide their services. Didn't tell them, just said, hey, here's the rebate based purely on energy production. And what emerged from CSI was a solar market that has these aggregators, these companies who provide typical program services. And down at the bottom here, you can look at some of those top performing companies. You're probably familiar with them. And each one of these is kind of equivalent to a standalone program. If you look under the hood of these companies, it's almost like they have their own EUC program, if you will. They provide their own marketing. They developed their own software. They have their own quality and assurance inspection. They're all competing with each other to deliver the best value proposition and energy production to their clients. So each one of these, I could point to these and say, that looks an awful lot like a program, a successful program. CSI didn't tell SolarCity or Sungevity or Solar Universe, so on, how to develop their model. They let the market determine that. Next slide, Chris. So solar and efficiency are really two sides of the same coin, you guys. And granted, some people are going to immediately think, well, look, there are really some differences. And that's true. But the main difference is that solar has a meter, right? It can accurately measure production. We know the sun's going to come up, the sun's going to go down day after day, and we can accurately predict how much production is going to be made from those solar panels. And people say, well, you know, you just can't do that with efficiency. You have human behavior, you have weather, you have all these other things. Okay, true. But what I'm proposing is actually we do have a meter, in a sense, for energy efficiency. And we can use that meter, you know, meter in quotes here, to develop the efficiency market, just like we did with solar. Now, I'm not referring to a literal meter that resides on a house. I don't think we're going to have an efficiency meter anytime soon, though who knows. But rather, when I'm referring to a meter, I'm talking about a system that's already on its way. It's almost in place. It's called CalTest and CalTrack, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And these function as efficiency meters for accountable energy units saved. And using that as a launching pad, we can define the path toward this new energy efficiency market. And that's really exciting stuff. So let me take you through the steps of how we think we can get there. Next slide, Chris. I'm going to dive in and go through these steps of how we can move from ratepayer subsidized program, that's what EUC is right now, to a commodity-driven energy market. And this is going to happen in phases, and the steps I'm going to show you are somewhat sequential, and we'll go through them in more detail, but briefly I just want to kind of step through these here to give you a flavor. So we allow for a diversity of business models. We'll talk about CalTest to calibrate predictions. We create this meter, in quotes, to give feedback to contractors, and we reward energy savings by moving from incentivizing percentage savings, which is what we're doing right now, to actual therm and kilowatt hour savings. So all the 1 through 3 are in the works. That's good stuff happening right now. And then what we do with that, 4 is all about reducing variance to make this something that's very attractive to private investment. 5 is looking at, okay, so we're moving more towards a resource here, but we might have some other things that we're interested in incentivizing, market transformation. We can still make that happen under this vision. 6 is making this look a little more like CSI, passing incentives through to contractors. We'll talk about why that's important. Want to recognize that public policy is very interested in incentivizing peak load reduction. That can also happen, and we can support demand side capacity. And then at the end, kind of the end goal here to get to a real market, we move towards efficiency, looking an awful lot like other things that utilities procure, other power plants or solar or whatever it is. You can procure efficiency just like these other ones. And that would be a really exciting day when we can see that happen. So let me dive right in here and take you through these steps. As I mentioned, EUC needs innovation and multiple options to serve the many types of businesses and many types of customers and many types of homes that we have in California. CalTest uses the valuable data we already have from Energy Upgrade California, the 7,500 homes that we've done that I mentioned. We have all the information from those homes, and we can create a baseline for predicting the actual savings of any given project that's coming into the pipeline now, right? So let me just talk about that for a moment. The 7,500 homes, they're different contractors. They had different housing stock, different climate zones, different upgrades that happen to those houses. And we can look at the data and say, okay, if there's a new project coming into the pipeline and it meets these criteria, what do we think will actually be the real savings coming from that project? And it's an awesome, it's such a simple and yet complex thing that we're doing, and it's awesome. And I want to say hats off to folks at PG&E who I think are pioneering this initiative. It's already underway. So from my understanding of CalTest, and some of you on the line will probably know this better than me, but my understanding is it calibrates energy unit predictions to actual post-project results. And it allows energy modeling software vendors to compete for contractor business, kind of based on their ability to accurately predict the energy unit savings. And I want to back up, and when I say energy modeling software, it's really not about software anymore. It could be a piece of paper, it can be an Excel document, it could be software, it could be Energy Pro. It's not really about that. It's really a system. And what we're really looking at is how well does it do at predicting actual energy savings of our new project based on the data that we already have. So rather than testing a model against model, which is what we've been doing so far, CalTest is the first system to test software against real houses and real results, right? It's not a simulation model as we know it. So this program is I think kind of the foundation of allowing us to move in the right direction. And kind of a bonus that I like a lot is that it's built on the National HPXML Foundation, which would allow for easy sharing of project data with program implementers, with regulators, with contractors. And believe me, as a contractor, I've been hungry for that. I want to know that whatever language the software is going to speak, it's going to be, we're going to pick a horse, it's going to be standardized, and I know I can start building out my own software systems that are going to speak with it to make my life much easier. Again, if you make it easier for the contractors to participate, you make it open so that they can build their software, their business models, you're going to have a lot more folks jump into the game here. My understanding, and the Q&A, if anyone wants to correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the time frame is somewhere in spring of 2014. So we're not far off from this actually launching. Next slide. Creating an energy efficiency meter, right? That strange concept that I'm talking about, that we can do that for efficiency like we did that with solar. But it goes back to the fact that performance, as I defined it before, home performance is not simulation. It's what happens at the meter. It's the actual energy savings. And CalTrack is kind of the step 2 to CalTest. It creates that feedback loop between energy unit predictions and the actual results. And again, I want to say whether those predictions come from Dean savings, from DEER, regression, simulation, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anything all in between. It's all about results, folks. It's all about the results. And what this will allow to happen is contractors are going to finally get real-time and simple measurement and verification feedback, so we can do a good job. And that's, again, something that we've been hungry for. In the years I've been with Energy Upgrade California, I have never, not once, received feedback about how my jobs are doing. I don't know whether I do great when I do an HVAC upgrade or whether I suck. I know that my test outs are good because I have to meet a certain program threshold, but I really don't know if that's translating into my clients saving energy. Or I really don't know if my air trap ceiling is making that huge a difference in people turning their furnaces on or not. Having some feedback would allow the contractors to start improving their systems, to look for ways, to incentivizing them to do the right thing, and to look for ways to get their clients to actually reduce energy. And if that's what's happening, high-performing contractors that are able to demonstrate superior performance, that they say, I'm going to tell my client, I'm going to get them a 20% energy savings, 10% energy savings, whatever it is, but they're really hitting that every time. They'll distinguish themselves in the marketplace. They'll kind of rise to the top. They'll be able to provide cost-effective services. And that real-time performance can be applied to any energy efficiency approach, all the business models. It will lift all the boats on a tide of real results. That sounds great, doesn't it? And the timeline here is also not very far off. Again, this is in the works. I understand summer, fall 2014, somewhere in there. It's one of those things. It keeps getting punted down the road a little bit. So whoever's listening, I just want to let you guys know, all the contractors we're waving the flag. We're saying, hey, we want to see this. We really want to see this as soon as possible. So once these things are in place, then we can get into what we really want to do. So that's step 3. And now that we know how much actual energy savings a project will produce based on CalTest, CalTrack, we move from incentivizing based on a percentage of energy use, as we're doing now with Energy Pro, right? It's just percentage of what that house will save to incentivizing actual energy savings. And the difference is pretty significant. So I'm sure you guys know, but let me explain how it's working right now and the issue. As it is right now, a small home, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 square foot house in Berkeley, a little bungalow that doesn't have any AC, we do a small upgrade project on that house, and they save, let's say, 30%, or Energy Pro predicts 30%. And maybe that house, if it does hit 30%, maybe the actual energy savings coming out of that house will say, let's say it's 100 kilowatt hours a month. I'm just throwing out numbers here. Compared to a house, 3,000 square foot ranch house with AC in a hot climate zone. And we also do a 30% energy savings. Now, both those two homes get the exact same incentive under Energy Upgrade California right now. But the truth is, that big 3,000 square foot ranch house, if I actually get a 30% energy savings, it's going to be a huge amount of actual energy savings. So we need to move away from that whole percentage reduction. It's really the actual energy savings is what we care about, right? And now PG&E is already doing this. They're proposing an advanced path, a new two-tier incentive for Energy Upgrade California that includes an energy unit rebate for kilowatt hours and therm saved. And it's kind of this blend so that we can wean ourselves off of the current system. And that's absolutely the way to go. So hooray, timeline early 2015. Would love to see it sooner, but if that's real, then that would be a win as well. Okay, so now that we've got these three things established, we can really get into transforming Energy Upgrade California. Let's go to step 4. Let me first dive into the graph below, so hopefully that will help explain the concept here. What we need to do is reduce variance. And if you look at this red line here, you have a mean of 50, right? And this red line maybe looks awfully familiar because I would say it's a lot of what Energy Upgrade California's numbers really do look like. In that you have this average, and then you have this very large standard deviation. So the program may say, hey, we have 21% energy savings. That's good, right? That's what we said in the earlier slide. That's good. But if the standard deviation is huge, like looking at this red line here, if we say the program is averaging 50, but then you have some customers that are getting 70% energy savings, others getting 20% energy savings, right? You have very happy customers on one end, that's great, but very unhappy customers on the other end, not good at all. And so contractors don't feel comfortable talking about what's going to actually happen. Because people don't care what the mean is, right? I mean, when we're thinking of the program, we care. We want to know overall what's our savings. But people care about their own home. They say, I don't care that your average is 50. What am I going to get? And as a contractor, I need to be able to speak to that to my customers, to tell them what they are going to get so they can make sound financial decisions. So if we can narrow, if we can focus this curve and reduce our variance, we'll have a lot more confidence in being able to tell our clients what the actual savings might be and predicting that as well. So to do this, and you're never going to be right every single time. I mean, it's not like I can actually tell my client 100% for sure. But if their project looks an awful lot like some other projects that we've done, the software is going to spit out a number. And, I don't know exactly what those attributes are going to be, but it could be based on a past contractor performance, the contractor's year in business, are they BPI certified or not. It could be based on what the house looks like, the house size, does it have AC, how many windows do they have, orientation, I don't know. It could be based on the work scope, climate zone. See, there's many things that could inform this curve, but when we're doing this, when we're grouping the energy unit savings into kind of pools of projects, pools of contractors or aggregators, that risk that some of these projects will underperform can be addressed by standard risk mitigation management tools, such as actuarial pooling. And this is done in other industries. This is done in healthcare. This is done in insurance. Let's look at other industries and see what they're doing that's been so successful, and we can apply it to our industry as well, because that's, once this risk is worked out, then we can bring a private industry investment, which we need to really ramp this up. Okay, if we could have this dovetail just at the moment we get the rewarding of energy savings set up, we can then dovetail with that and have this launch at around the same time, early 2015. Step 5. A new incentive structure is needed to make to move to a procurement market. We're going to talk about that as kind of the end-all goal here. And PG&E's proposal of addressing this issue is a great start. But to achieve real market transformation, the kind of transformation that produces a scalable market, the incentives need to do two things. Okay, we need to pay for energy unit savings. It's kind of what we've been talking about, this resource-based incentive. Let's pay for long-term energy savings. And we need to do this at a project price point that's attractive to early adopters, right? So there might be other things here that we need to incentivize in order to kind of jumpstart EUC. I know it's kind of like years into it to say jumpstart EUC, but really that's what we need to do here. I mean, these early adopters, folks that are in EUC right now, their participation laid the foundation for EUC, and we need to get more and more people in to popularize home performance. By comparison, to go back to CSI, CSI incentives were set to create demand, not to meet total resource cost rules. And when CSI first started, it provided a $4 per watt incentive, which amounted to about 50% of the project cost incentive. That was really large and stimulated a lot of interest and a lot of the demand. So we can have this resource incentive. In addition, we can have market transformation incentives to kind of dovetail onto this that will reward customers for achieving deeper energy savings, or we can address social equity issues, or whatever it is, provide a big enough carrot to really build demand momentum here. And then once that happens, just like CSI, we can kind of ramp it down, ramp out the incentives. So all we're left is just that resource incentive and a market, right? Next step. Here's just a kind of a strategic thing that we feel we should do. And again, similar to CSI, the rebate money could go directly to the contractor, and the customer would pay the net project cost. It's just a simpler value proposition. Customers get the incentive benefit without needing to wait for a check, which I think reduces their risk or concern, just makes it easier for the contractors to explain the program. And then contractors can compete based on their ability to effectively access and market the resulting net project cost. If we set this up right, we'll have private financing coming in here so contractors can get money to float these project costs. And then contractors will just sell the real benefits of home performance: health, safety, stable energy bills, and comfort. We don't need to go into the whole how the program works. That's happening on the back end, right? And the contractor is just getting the net project cost. Similarly, next step. Similarly, another important change that will need to happen is we realize that incentivizing peak load reduction is really important. State policy seeks 80% reduction in energy use by 2050. And so every saved energy unit counts towards greenhouse gas reductions and deferred power plant construction. And that can only be achieved by improving building performance and occupant behavior, of course. So we need feedback tools, reliable prediction, feedback for companies so that they can keep improving quality. So I can keep telling my guys what they need to work on in order to improve the actual savings. And we need feedback tools for homeowners and occupants, and that will come they'll come from this program if it starts ramping up, if we start getting economies of scale here. I think we'll see smart meters, home monitoring meters, whatever it is, time savings, energy rates, that'll support additional behavior here. And time of savings would reward savings achieved during peak use hours versus off-peak savings. So we could have kind of this, we could tailor a blend here so that contractors that are really hitting the peak load reductions are getting a kicker of some sort, that we care about that. And if we do all these steps together, ultimately what we will head towards, next step, is moving towards utility procurement. And, and this, turn on the violins. Oh, utility procurement. We can enter the era of energy efficiency procurement. And this is great because this is what utilities do really well. This is what they know. And just like renewables are treated as an energy resource through feed-in tariffs, Energy unit savings could also be purchased as a phase-out tariff. And traditional market partners like investors can apply their expertise to scaling the economic opportunity of efficiency as a commodity. And because we're relying on real energy unit savings, the need for regulation to manage risk is removed. And utilities regulators can focus on what they do best and just let the market forces work here. You know, utility regulators can ensure savings are real, the branding's appropriate, health and safety, and consumer protection. That's it. The market will figure out the rest. And what this looks like, we've seen it, again, we've seen it in other industries. We've seen it in our own industry where utilities set up an RFP to procure a certain amount of production, let's say 2 megawatts worth of production from solar. We could do the same thing. Let's procure 2 megawatts of energy efficiency and have people bid on that. Wouldn't that be awesome? So I find it a little easier to look at this kind of visual, you know, in 1 through 5. This is explaining again step 8. But let me step through this. So here's what it could look like. This is based on the commercial solar model. I kind of mentioned this already. IOUs would issue an efficiency portfolio standard with energy efficiency targets and kind of the terms of what that contract would look like. So they say we want 2 megawatts of energy savings. And they would host a reverse auction. And basically, in doing that, that's kind of a standard procurement practice. They're looking for folks to bid in for the lowest price bidder for energy unit savings. And so the energy efficiency aggregators or third-party implementers or contractors, whatever you want to call them, bid on this contract and guarantee savings using competitive business practices to ensure that they achieve that energy unit capacity that's being bid on. And so now we have private investors supporting these aggregators. I mean, who knows what these aggregators would be, but you know, it could be even the folks that are currently the program implementers. Maybe they become aggregators. Maybe big contractors show up and they become aggregators. Who knows? But these aggregators, based on the quality of their business models, they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to produce the savings here at the lowest cost. And so they're going to win these procurement IOUs, procurement portfolios. And efficiency contractors can then, you know, the smaller guys can then band together and sell their energy unit savings to these energy efficiency aggregators. So now we have a real marketplace, and they themselves, of course, will be competing based on their ability to deliver reliable energy savings. And all this will flow upwards. So we're moving away from having ratepayers provide an ongoing incentive here and just letting market forces work. Next slide. So to summarize what I'm talking about here, we know what works by looking at other successful markets. And we are proposing that we adjust Energy Upgrade California to function the same way, you guys, so we can meet the scale that we need to. And I want to really raise this flag and say this again. Sorry if I'm beating the drum too much here, but we have to get on board with a long-term strategy that will be supported by these programmatic changes. Otherwise, we're just tweaking the system again and again and again, and actually just annoying the contractors and getting them to leave. It's having a counter effect that we want it to have. Now, saying another way, these short-term tactics have to be aligned with a long-term strategy that everyone kind of is on board with. And I don't say it as an exaggeration, but I think we're in an emergency situation here. I mean, we're getting bad press, and I don't see the numbers really working out, and I think there's a lot of wishful thinking here. We need to be scalable, and we need to have a sustainable efficiency market. It won't happen without leadership and teamwork. And now, we certainly don't have all the answers. Efficiency First doesn't have all the answers, but this is kind of a macro vision here, and we're preparing what we call an EUC 2.0 action plan to support this course correction. And we're still getting input from our members and working on this, but we're probably going to have another webinar in the next month or so where we're going to really dive into the nitty-gritty of what we want to see changed that will support this overall course correction. But in the meantime, to give you a sense, let me kind of give you a preview, next slide, of what that might look like. Some of these points we've already touched on, kind of 1 through 3 already in the works. And we'd like to see all hands on deck really start focusing on that. If everyone can agree that that's important, it'll happen. And that will allow us to start incentivizing units of predicted savings and move away from this percentage reduction, which doesn't mean anything to anyone. Next slide. We have to give customers and contractors monetary reward for achieving the predicted energy goals. Align, if you want to see something, incentivize people to do what it is that you want to see, right? So a really simple concept. So align what you want to see, align that incentive with it. And then, as I mentioned, like CSI, get those incentives assignable to the contractors. And then we'll have this open third-party implementer aggregator model. It's not that the EUC program is going to create these. These are going to start emerging once we turn this over to a real marketplace. And we can partner aggressively with PACE 2.0, which is going to come online at just the right time if we really get this off the ground quickly now. And we really say by start of 2015, this is really working. We're really doing this. PACE will come online at just the right time. It'll be perfect. And at that point, we can develop operating capital sources, reduce flow times for incentives. We can have financing. All the things that we've wanted to have happen will happen on their own through market forces. So next slide. I'm at the end of my spiel here. Thanks for your patience and listening. I want to open it up to questions and answers. Just a few logistics here before we dive into that. Be sure to enter your audio PIN number to allow the organizer to unmute you. You can see it in your audio control panel in the top right or right side. And if you don't do that, we can't hear you. And you have to use the raise hand feature to be unmuted because the moderator will do that for you. And if you don't want to, or if you're not getting a chance to speak, just send your questions. You can type them in, and the moderator will jump in when we feel that it's appropriate to answer those questions. All right. Next slide. So I'll leave this last slide up here. Next slide, Chris. All right. I don't know. Maybe the last slide didn't make it in. Oh, there we go. So. Here's just some recap of our vision for EUC 2.0, food for thought, as we open it up here, and welcome your questions. I will be here to answer questions. Matt is online, and he's been instrumental in helping with this, as is Chris, so we'll do our best to answer questions that come up. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ori. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Go ahead, Ken.
Good morning. Yeah, Ken Justo. There was a lot there to take in. As we discussed, especially, and I agree with you, we definitely need to make changes. CSI is a great model for us to look at. I still get afraid when I hear about, well, we need different software and pay for actual energy savings, because and I did a lot of energy savings back in the 80s. I've been very much involved in energy savings type of models over the years, and especially in the residential arena where it's just not cookie cutter. It's so hard to really measure energy savings year over year. Daughter comes home from college, daughter leaves for college. And she's home during the summer and runs the air conditioner. There's so many things that act on that. In my mind, I still think the prescriptive, the measures, a reward system for prescriptive measures is probably, in my mind, one of the best ways to go. The trouble is there just hasn't been enough funds there for homeowners. And like you pointed out early on with CSI, people were getting 50, 60%, with federal tax credits, even 70, 80% of their projects paid for. And that's how we got this whole thing rolling. And I think that's what we need. I mean, it's crazy to think somebody with a 1,000 square foot house gets the same incentive for air sealing as somebody with a 5,000 square foot house. So there definitely needs to be an overhaul here. However, I still don't, I'm very much afraid of, okay, whose software are we going to use, because I see it dumping a lot of money towards that. I would love to see it with a prescriptive measure that was more aggressive than what we have today, but really rewarded people for doing certain things. And that was one comment on that, and then I had one other comment as you were discussing the customer paying net project costs. Again, I agree with that, but once again, those incentives back to the contractor hinge upon having your project approved and having everything go through the QC part of this thing and getting signed off. Currently, we're subject to being signed off by the local municipality and then whomever the IOU's inspecting agency is. And, we have found that to be a real roadblock. It's getting better, but I mean, even currently today, I probably got 45,000 in receivables. We let the clients signed over to us so that we can get these projects done for them. Yeah, but that can sometimes be a problem. It could be a problem for a lot of contractors.
So Ken, let me answer kind of the first. I heard a couple points, couple questions there, and your question around your concern about the software. The point you bring up tells me that I didn't do a great job of explaining it, because it's a very valid point. And I think a lot of people get stuck on this idea like, oh God, we're going to have now multiple softwares, and how are they going to work? And it's a little more subtle than that. I think, Matt, do you want to jump in here and help explain that point? I think you could do it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. When you say the word software, it brings to mind Energy Pro, and that's actually, I think, the wrong term. The approach really is underlying any investment in energy efficiency, whether it's a deemed, prescriptive incentive or some sort of piece of software, and there's a range from kind of where we are today with Energy Pro and a bunch of different options that have different levels of accuracy. And what we're talking about, I think, underpins any of these approaches. It's basically saying that we need to create alignment between predicted savings and actual results. And it's not actually about software in the way that we're currently thinking about it. It's really about creating this relationship. And it's really it applies as equally to home upgrade as it does to advanced home upgrade. And for those who aren't familiar, that's the REN-based point systems or a prescriptive approach or a simulation model. Each underpinning any of these approaches is a prediction of results. And we want to create accountability between that prediction and the actual outcomes to create a level playing field. And I think the thing to consider is that when we simplify these systems, we actually start to get unintended consequences, as you referenced. A really simple prescriptive incentive, for example, for air sealing is going to over-incentivize smaller houses and under-incentivize big ones where the savings are. And so you end up kind of rolling towards slightly more complex systems. We don't want to take a position on any of that. We just want to make sure that the payments and the incentives are aligned with the actual delivered savings. And Ken, to your point about the complexity of local governments and of utilities triple checking your work, I think the fundamental point is, when we're betting with other people's money, when we're using ratepayer funds and there's no accountability, the approach of the program has been, rather unsuccessfully, mind you, to try to kind of micromanage every step in the process. And I guess the theory is, and I think that all of this has to be taken together, is that by becoming accountable to the results, tracking and actually aligning incentives with the delivered savings, that part of that has to be that the program has to start allowing the industry to develop the business model and not micromanage every step in the process and add all that extra overhead. So I just want to be, again, uber clear that this is not about software or the way we come to define advanced path. This is really about looking at actual savings, and that ultimately allows for all these other models to coexist, and really for the winning solutions, the solutions that deliver real savings, make money for contractors and customers actually want to buy, those solutions can begin to emerge because we're actually incentivizing the right outcomes. And that's what really frees up the market to innovate and can allow regulators to focus on what is a much more typical regulatory role of kind of basic consumer protection and making sure that the market's functioning.
So this is Chris Cohn. I just want to remind people, if you have a comment or a question, could you use the raise your hand feature? We have quite a number of folks on the call, and the webinar system doesn't allow us to unmute everyone all at once. So we definitely want to have a robust conversation. If you could indicate that you have a comment or a question with the raised hand feature, that would be very helpful.
I have one comment from an attendee, and that they're concerned that there are currently not enough home performance contractors to compete in the bidding process, especially in rural areas, and they'd like to address that concern.
Ori, Matt?
Yep, I'm here. So the problem with the bidding process, there's not currently enough home performance contracts to compete in the bidding process. So could whoever said that, could they raise their hand and just explain a little bit more about what they mean in that? I'm not sure, especially in rural, I'm not sure I grok exactly what it is.
So Bobby Bennett?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
What I mean by that is we actually have a business model where we go in and we do the audits and we take the hoops that the contractor has to jump through out of their hands, and we do all that for them. And we have tried to go through a bidding process and get, several contractors to come in and do the bid and the job to get the lowest price for the customer. Only there aren't enough HP contractors out there that will go to certain areas. And it's hard to find contractors that will go through the bidding process with us. They want to do their own sales part. They want to do their own jobs. They want to have their salespersons on the job. And when the audit comes around to get the rebates, they want to pull somebody in who's just going to do an audit based on what they're selling the homeowner. Our approach is we do the audit, we tell them everything that's available and let the homeowner decide. And then we also help them with, financing options. And we actually give them the bottom line of this is how much it's going to cost you a month to make your house more efficient. So the problem we're finding...
This is Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Sorry.
Matt, can I just
okay, so
jump in for a second?
Yeah, jump in, Orion. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were at the...
Oh, no, not at all. So Bobby, I hear you. I'll let Matt speak to it too, but there probably aren't enough home performance contractors right now to really complete a good bidding process, and I think that's a testament to the fact that EUC is not working. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, if EUC was working, we wouldn't really be talking about home performance contractors. There could be a plethora of different contractors that you could aggregate that could provide these services. It's just contractors don't know about it, or even if you're providing, if you're a third-party auditor or rater or whatever your model is, the marketplace is just not developed. It's tiny, so we don't have enough contractors participating. You're exactly right. So, Matt, that was my point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to kind of go. I think there's a fundamental point, like you said, that we clearly don't have a ton of involvement. That really comes back to, I think, the fact that the market's learned that this is a very challenging business model to make money at, and I think any amount of until we kind of remedy the fact that doing energy efficiency as part of EUC is a very, very hard business model to be profitable, and that the 17% incentives don't really even cover the extra cost of the incentive, that it's very unlikely we're going to see a major scale up no matter what we do, because that's a real, you're not going to see investment if there's not profit at the other end. But the other thing I'd mention is that, fundamentally, what you're describing is a business model, a third-party auditing model, and that's great. And the challenges you're describing, I think, are challenges that many of us have experienced. And so really, if we can focus in on, rewarding the right outcomes, then frankly, making that work for you in the marketplace is going to be a function of what your customers are willing to pay for, and, whether or not contractors, and there's some issues that I've experienced and others with the third-party modeling as a contractor, and if it works for contractors and they make money on those jobs, they'll bid. And it's really, again, we want to not, and I'm very attuned to really trying not to take a position on what business models will actually work. But if we set up the incentives correctly, those solutions that do drive demand and are profitable and produce real savings can be successful and emerge.
Other questions or comments? Would love your guys' input, feedback. Does this sound awesome? Does this sound crazy? It's a good time to let us know.
So this is Chris Cohn. I just want to check in with folks that you are able to access the raised hand feature. That was what we were hoping to count on to identify folks that wanted to make a comment and participate in the discussion. And here we go. Okay, Mindy, you are live.
Hey, thanks. I couldn't see it. It's on the little sidebar, so it did take me a while to find the raised hand. Hi, all. Very good, interesting presentation. Great stuff, Ari. I really appreciate all the thoughtfulness in this. And I think it kind of goes to this last conversation about, what do you think the timing of this kind of transformation is? I saw that you see the software coming online later this year is going to be very important and transformative. But this idea of building up this market, I know CSI took 10 years really to get there. Is that what we're looking at? Is a commitment of 10 years to changing over to this kind of model? Or how do you guys feel this actually could move and ramp up?
This is Ori. Well, I think everyone will probably have a different opinion, but I'm of the opinion that we do need that long-term commitment and investment in this. And I would say CSI was very, very successful year 7 or 8, or I don't know, somewhere in there. It didn't really take 10 years. It was funded for 10 years and it ramped down. But those first 3 to 5 years were just so instrumental. I mean, suddenly solar just popped. Like the business models just figured it out. Boom! Suddenly solar was on the map. I don't know exactly what year that will happen, but believe me, we'll know what that looks like when it hits. And I think setting up the framework so that we show the marketplace from a public policy perspective, hey, we're committed to this, guys. You can go spend money on developing your systems because this is around, this is real, this is going to be heavily invested at the start. So jump in now, jump in. That will be the right message to get contractors in.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up, Ori.
Yeah.
Matt, did you have a comment?
Sure. Yeah, and then I'll let Mindy follow up. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mindy. I apologize. But I think the recommendations that we've been talking about as efficiency first is, in the short run, we need a combination of some really aggressive tactical changes to make sure that this is incentivized properly to customers and is something that makes money for contractors fundamentally. And the good news is that there's enough money in the system that just isn't actually making it to the contractor or the customer directly in a way that really changes the economics. And then simultaneous, so we need to do some really aggressive near-term changes. And then I believe that we could rapidly move to a pilot of this procurement model. It's not turning off the incentives and wholesale changing, but we can allow it to win through carrots, not sticks. So, if we were to, for example, while still giving rebates in the current structure, but in the very near term, in the next couple of years, stand up a reverse auction for savings. And the beauty of a reverse auction is that in the first auctions for these capacity contracts, the price will be very high because there's a lot of risk and uncertainty, and these can start relatively small so that, we can encourage folks to actually start to play. And ultimately, as that market starts to evolve and there's more confidence in that entire system in terms of how the payments work and also how likely the savings are to actually come in, by the efficiencies of that system in terms of the amount of overhead required, we believe will ultimately win out. And again, it doesn't have to be, one day we don't turn off the rebates and turn on this brand new system, but we can start piloting it and start moving in that direction as soon as humanly possible.
Great, and I think the only other question kind of in that same phase is I look at those and the different scales there, and I see different barriers or challenges of implementing each one of, say, those 8 steps. Do you see those as kind of, you have to do those steps to get to each one and to have this? Are there ones that you can say, kind of to what you were just saying, that, we need to do these no matter what immediately, and if we're not doing this until, we can look at this one farther out, that, if we don't do X, Y, and Z, that's just a no-starter. And I don't have to necessarily answer that, but I think that's probably something as you start developing the EUC 2.0 is understanding, kind of the dependencies.
Sure, I think that's a good point, and I personally just feel that the critical first step is a commitment by everyone that we have to move towards actual energy savings. I think that's a non-starter. If we try to do it based on not real data, I really don't see the point.
So we do have some questions coming in through the question pane. We have a question from Jean Clinton, who apparently does not have a microphone, so she submitted her comment in writing. It says, CSI was premised on declining cost of installations. Does the EE retrofit market anticipate that innovation and scale could warrant significant cost reductions on the horizon to justify higher front-end subsidies or potentially bigger federal tax credits, many residential programs are not cost-effective on the basis of actual resource savings realized.
So this is Matt. I can speak to those big questions. I think clearly there can be drastic efficiencies gained in how energy efficiency is delivered to the marketplace, and that's really through business model innovation. However, I think we all know that the equipment cost reductions in the photovoltaic industry are probably not achievable at the same level in energy efficiency, just as a function of the type of materials that we're using. So, energy efficiency is a lot more labor costs, less materials, and again, we're not going to see the same kind of drop in HVAC prices as we've recently seen in solar cells. But I do think there are some significant efficiencies that can be gained in the marketplace. And then in terms of the cost effectiveness of EUC, I really think we need to think about how we are actually measuring and thinking about cost effectiveness. So when you look at the total amount of money we've spent on program administration, consumer spending on a host of non-energy benefits on these $13,000 projects delivering 21% gas reductions, if you add up all of those costs through the lens of a total resource cost test, this program doesn't look very good. If we kind of stipulate that a lot of the spending on the program front was maybe not very effective in terms of actually impacting the market directly. If you were to look at just the basic economics of these projects, where you have a 17.2% incentive, which is less than it actually costs for most contractors to participate in the program. So a very small incentive is a function of the cost of the job, driving these 21% reductions. That's actually a pretty efficient delivery model, and it's very much on par with other programs around the country. And I think we need to really think about how we actually test and think about cost effectiveness for residential energy efficiency in particular, especially knowing that, for most customers, and I've actually done some of this research directly, energy savings is not the primary benefit they're acquiring. So they're, 80% of the money that's being spent on these projects, more than 80% actually, is consumer spending, and the vast majority of that is going towards health and comfort, really mostly comfort, frankly. And so I think that at a fundamental level, if we could make the program delivery side of EUC much more efficient by having it focus on the things that programs and regulators most usually focus on, which is not typically things like consumer marketing and lead acquisition, for example, there's basic goodness in the savings that we're driving for the ratepayer investment, especially through the lens of really more cost-effectiveness tests that are in the California Standard Practice Manual that are much more appropriate for residential energy efficiency, like the program administrator cost test that looks at the ratepayer investment and the savings, and doesn't account for the amount of overhead spending in terms of training up a new workforce and various program expenses, and of course the bulk of the money that's being invested by customers that isn't directly tied to energy efficiency. So I guess in summation, I would say that we will see, I think, some drastic efficiencies in the delivery model if we allow the market to actually function, and we have to rethink how we think about cost effectiveness in a general sense.
Thank you, Matt. Craig Lawson, you submitted a comment, and I'm going to unmute you if you would like to present your question and comment to the group. Craig, are you there? Craig?
Yes.
You're live. Would you like to pose your questions to the group?
It's not a question. It's just a comment. It has to do with the concept of, or the model of trying to approach selling energy upgrade works to clients, and who, in the customer or the client's view, is the expert. Is it the person that's actually performing the audit, or is it the home performance contractor that's actually doing the work and saving the energy?
Craig, this is Ori. I'm not sure the thrust of the question. I guess would you say more like what's behind your question?
No, it wasn't a question. It was I was responding to a comment earlier in context with the concept of why there isn't enough people wanting to bid home performance jobs with audits performed by others.
I see. Right.
Thank you, Craig. We have Dov Kamras on the line. So Dov, would you like to make your comment? Dov, are you there? Oops, hang on. I think you're self-muted, Dov. If you could unmute yourself, you have the floor. Okay, well, Dov is looking for the unmute button, and we do have a question through the chat pane here from Mark Stout, promoting more independent assessments and possibly project management approach where it is obvious the customer is being assured someone is protecting or investments. Mark, are you on the line? I'd like to unmute you and have you pose your question. Mark, are you there? Mark Stout? Okay, let me take one more crack at this. See if I can read this in an intelligible way. Mark asks, promoting more independent assessments and possibly project management approach where it is obvious the customer is being assured someone is protecting their investment. We have much more success when we protect the customer and provide a financial assessment on how they are going to pay for it. These are two key components to move a project forward. So that
This is Ori. Unless Mark can jump on, I'm going to respond to what I think I'm hearing here.
yeah.
And I think he also asked earlier and something else about advertising, like are we going to do more advertising because people don't know about the program. And Mark, if I'm misunderstanding the thrust of your question, let me know. But essentially, we're saying, folks, we have to make some serious changes here. We can't keep it. I think, Mark, what it sounds like you're talking about is kind of, a program again. That the program is going to perhaps needs to do more advertising. We get people to hear about this or to oversee things. That's what we've been doing. It hasn't been working, and we have to kind of revision this and think about the marketplace doing those things. Sure, government maybe needs to do some oversight to make sure people are safe, but we don't want. In what other industry are you familiar with the government doing advertising for us? And we had millions of dollars spent on EUC advertising, and as far as I can tell, not many people know about it. So if there's a big enough incentive and we let the market do its thing, companies they'll spend their advertising dollars. They'll be promoting this. They'll want people to hear about it because they know they're going to sell more work.
So Mark, are you available to comment or clarify your comment? Okay, I thought he was online with us. We have a comment from Brian Bissold, and so Brian, I'm going to unmute you if you would like to speak.
Yeah, hi, it's Brian with Kevel Home Performance in San Francisco. First, a comment. I commend everyone involved. I think actualized savings, real-time savings is the way this has to go. It's going to solve a lot of problems. Comment, I think, by Mark. Yes, project management and ensuring that the project is done well is important. I think where we run into issues potentially is that the energy model allows us to miss the sort of field QA opportunities that we have to infuse. So if we can actually just see the actualized energy savings, it rules out the possibility that the energy model was done improperly or the improvements weren't carried through to what we proposed in the project scope of work. I think for a San Francisco contractor, I'm a little worried about what's going to happen to us because that's just, we are in a Mediterranean climate and it's the forces of change. I do believe it's a good idea, and we'll just stand by and see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that too. The irony here, thanks for mentioning being in San Francisco, Brian, because we're in Richmond, we're in the East Bay, and many of our clients aren't buying right now based on the energy savings, right? So, Brian, this might be, you and I might be shooting ourselves in the foot, and certainly some of our members down in temperate climates down in Southern California, they also brought up this issue, like, hey, you know, are we shooting ourselves in the foot? But I think it's a testament to how much contractors want this change, that they say, you know, even if we are, damn it, it's not like I'm running to the bank laughing right now. I'd rather see this actually work, and if I have to get out because I'm on the right climate zone or I can't sell it, fine, so be it. But I believe in this, so let's make it really happen. And yeah, that's an amazing statement, and I feel the same way. Like, look, if I'm in a climate zone that's not going to work, okay, then maybe I have to adopt or adapt or die. Or maybe I tell them, look, I can get you this rebate that you're not going to have a huge actual energy savings because your bills aren't that high because you don't run anything. But you know what? You're doing it for green reasons, comfort, health, whatever, and I can still sell on that. So I think I think it's a really cool thing that you bring that up, and it's a cool thing that contractors, and if you talk to contractors, we're the ones that are most behind this, are still wanting to give it a go.
Thank you, Ori. I think we have another comment from Dav Kamaris. So Dav, I'm unmuting you, I think. Yes, Dav, are you there?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes. You are live, so please make your comment or ask a question, whatever is on your mind.
Yeah, I was curious. It seemed when I used to be far more involved in EUC, what I noticed was just the bureaucratic, you know, methodology, the way the program was being implemented was so heavy-handed, no changes could be made. Projects are really difficult to push through. So I'm sort of curious on what is EUC administration, those that direct the program for the utilities / their lawyers are saying about any kind of change in the future.
Is there anyone from the program side that would like to speak to that question? Well, Dov, I think I'll just chime in with my personal opinion, and that is that I think we've always been working toward the same goal in good faith. And when changes need to be made, a course correction needs to be made, you know, what we're doing today is part of that process of having a dialogue that will lead us to some decisions about what can be changed to move in a direction that'll get us the results we want. And so there's a lot of questions about how the implementation or how these proposed changes might actually be implemented, but if a vision is clear and the partners are on the same page about the magnitude and the direction of a course correction, then a lot of the details will be worked out as we go. So you bring up some good points, but I also think that moving ahead and taking the time to get on the same page about a course correction that's going to be effective is going to alleviate a lot of the details that right now may look daunting. So we have about 15 minutes left in our allotted time. If others have a comment or question, I believe the raise your hand feature should be on the little control panel bar to the left of your main control panel there. And if you could click on that to let us know, or submit a question or a request to be unmuted through the question pane, then we can continue our dialogue here. So I'm going to take a minute and look through the question pane, see if we have some new questions. Oh, okay, Brian is back, yes. Hi, Brian.
Yeah, it's Brian with Kevel Home again. Or you may have mentioned this in the presentation, if so I apologize. Actualized savings, at what point in utility bill usage history are we going to determine that actualized savings? Is it over a course of time? Is the homeowner then incentivized in some way to use a lower set point in their thermostat, whatever it may be that might provide some additional energy savings? And if so, when is that going to be calculated? Is it a single time? Is it a percentage based?
Brian, that's a great question. This is Matt Golden. Nice to say hi, by the way. It's been a while.
Hello.
I think the thinking has been kind of a two-step process. And it's really, energy efficiency fundamentally is a statistical calculation. It's really, it's not about individual houses. It's really about portfolios of projects that we have, and from that you can derive a statistical energy savings result based on past performance that includes what were the savings and what is the confidence in terms of those savings based on past performance. And just to be clear, so the idea is there is a lot of variance on individual homes. Some people's kids go to college, some people's kids come home from college. More of that these days than we'd like, but that's going to be in every portfolio. And so the good news on residential versus commercial, for example, is that we get to pretty large numbers pretty quickly, so that a lot of the kind of behavioral changes and whatnot within that portfolio kind of normalize themselves out pretty easily. And the thinking right now that is that in the near term, because there hasn't been any feedback mechanism, you as a contractor don't really know how well you do on your projects, and your customers certainly don't have that information, that we start with really a no-blame system where it's past performance that's measured based on, again, the statistical calculation on previous jobs that have been conducted initially by software tool and eventually potentially by other factors, which is what we describe in kind of this idea of creating portfolios. But we're using that past performance to influence basically future predictions. So homeowners still get a rebate. Contractors are not on the hook for directly having the savings, delivering the savings financially. But there's a relationship there. So if you overpredict in the past, or a software vendor has a propensity to overpredict in the past, we make adjustments on future predictions to reduce that overprediction in the future, and we feed that information back to contractors. So contractors that do a better job can actually show their customers for the first time how they compare to their peers and start to reverse the trend where right now performing well costs more and actually ends up being a penalty in the marketplace in many cases. And so that's kind of the initial step. And again, it's very much will be the same process for contractors and customers in the marketplace, but there'll be this feedback loop and an ongoing system of likely quarterly adjustments based on actual performance. That then builds a data set that says, look, projects and contractors that have certain attributes perform in a certain way, and we actually know how much savings are emerging based on the billing data. And that becomes the foundation for this ability in the future to start to procure energy efficiency as a resource and have really third-party implementers or aggregators, same thing, taking direct performance risk and essentially building the power plant or investing in building this distributed megawatt power plant and be getting paid for the savings over time based on what actually is delivered. And I think that a lot of what, again, the market will kind of determine how this ultimately plays out, but it's very akin to other kind of typical markets and frankly very similar to how the solar market's structured, where the expectation is that the market would figure out what the right mix is for customers and contractors. You clearly would want to have some shared risk. You'd want the customer to have some upside benefit to keep them on the hook so they don't open all their windows. But again, that's really a business model decision, and the reward comes basically in the form of net savings. So there's a pre-baseline, and what we're looking at is the actual reductions in energy that we can statistically derive based on the billing data. And that is net of all sorts of things, behavior, IP thermostats, better education to the customer, whatever a contractor can do or an aggregator or an implementer can come up with that delivers better results has value now. And it'll really be up to the market to figure out what tactics make sense economically that deliver better results and have a payback in the form of getting paid to the utility sector as a resource that ultimately works. So I guess the answer would be that I think different third-party implementers will derive different basic business models that will work for different types of contractors and different types of customers. And the good news is I think that if we reward the right outcomes, those models that strike it right, that get that equation right and make money for contractors and customers are happy and deliver real savings will win out. And if you miss any of those marks, you either got to change or you might move out of the marketplace, which is an efficiency unto itself.
Thank you, Matt. We have a comment from Kobe Rudolph.
Hi, Chris. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. One of your slides during the presentation talked about some of the companies or businesses that are engaged on the solar side right now, maybe at least partly as a result of CSI. And like you mentioned, they each seem to have their own model for how they do things and how they interact with contractors and customers. I'm wondering if maybe you can kind of give a sense for where you see contractors fitting in to that eventual type of procurement model, or as we get further and further toward paying for actual energy savings. Do you see? And I guess the thrust behind the question is, are we talking about a situation where each contractor, would be doing all the data behind, bidding for energy savings or those kinds of things, or are there different, or like CSI, are there kind of different models for how that future could look? Or, where do you see the contractor there?
Yeah, Kobe, I think it's a good question, and of course, the most honest answer is we don't know. We'll see. But to use the example of the companies that have kind of come to the top on the solar side, I can imagine very much that we'll have efficiency companies that look similar. Like SolarCity is pretty vertically integrated. They're a national company. They do everything from start to finish. And I'm sure there'll be some big efficiency companies that float to the top. Compare that to Sungevity, where they do all the front end, the sales, the design, the marketing, but then they have this network of smaller installers all over the country that do the actual work for them. So those, it's not like the smaller installers are left out in the cold. They're very busy, but their work gets rolled up into the value proposition that Sungevity offers. And then so we have franchises, all these different things. I think efficiency will kind of pan out somewhat similarly to that, and we'll have successful, different bigger and smaller successful companies float to the top, whatever business model it looks like.
Great. We have 5 minutes left in our allotted time. Are there any final comments or questions that you would like to submit, either through the question pane or by raising your hand using the control panel option there? Matt and Ori, would you like to make any final comments or observations before we close today's session?
Yeah, maybe just one last comment that if it doesn't come out too clear right in the presentation, is that I really want to ask anyone who's listening, who has any sort of power to make this course correction, to please hear us, to know that Efficiency for California, we have the ear of the contractors that are involved in this program. And as you guys have heard from me before, we don't feel like we've been listened to. And this presentation, I really hope it's not something that sounded really good and then gets left in the dust as something too weird, too complicated, too hard to do. Like we really, as contractors, I understand that many people work really hard at making Energy Upgrade California work with really great intentions. I really think we're in a dangerous situation, and that I hear a lot of desire to make differences in the hope that they'll work, and I really don't think that's what it's going to be. It's going to take some pretty serious, someone mentioned, well, are we just scrapping Energy Upgrade California? No, not at all. Like, we have a lot of good things that came out of Upgrade California, and it'll still be called Upgrade California. It'll still look like, in some ways, kind of this concept. But these fundamental changes we feel are going to be necessary. Otherwise, I feel, and many contractors feel, that Energy Upgrade California is going to slowly just whittle out and die. So please hear us that we feel passionate about this, and we really would like you guys to take a serious, hard look at making these changes, and we're open to the conversation. Please just have it with us. Matt, do you want to jump in?
Matt?
All right.
Okay.
Well, no worries. I think that sums it up.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us today and to join the conversation, to hear the ideas that were presented. And as Ori just said, your comments and continuing dialogue are very welcome, and we hope you'll reach out to us to have those conversations. So thank you for your time. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be posted on our website shortly for your access as well. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.